Good evening, everyone. For everyone who's watching and joining us today, hope you're feeling well and getting all set for the festive season. We are here to discuss. Typically, we talk of survivorship issues, but today we are going to talk about the importance of prevention, importance of screening, and how you should be more aware of your own symptoms and changes in the body, and why it's important to look at a universal health aspect of it, including for persons with disability. I will quickly introduce Patients Engage and then move on to introducing our uh, panelists. So, as most of you know, Patients Engage is an online platform. We've operational for over 5 years and focused on evidence-based and holistic management of chronic conditions from the perspective of patients and family caregivers. We strongly believe in the value of lived experiences and how being empowered and being engaged, uh, leads to better quality of life. We have been doing webinars now for a long time. And as far as cancer is concerned, I think this is our 10th webinar probably. Uh, we've launched the Cancer Power Circle. So those of you who would like to join that, it's a Facebook group linked to our Patients Engage Facebook page. So you can join that. These are some of the topics we've discussed in the last few months. And last month, as part of breast cancer awareness, we did a survivorship series where we talked about staying fit after breast cancer. We talked of issues of body image, and we talked about managing side effects of hormonal therapy. So today we are here with two of our panelists. We've got Dr. Gauravi Mishra, who is a professor and physician in the Department of Preventive Oncology at Tata Memorial Hospital. She received her MD in community medicine from Mumbai University and has received fellowship in cancer prevention from the National Cancer Institute US and trained in epidemiology at the IARC Summer School on Cancer Epidemiology at Lyon, France. She's actively involved in research, and her research work informs a lot of the cancer programs in India. We also have with us Abha Khetarpal, who is a writer, counselor, teacher, social worker, a motivational speaker, and an activist. She's a national awardee and one of 100 women achievers in India, an independent consultant in the field of disability and sexuality. She's the first woman from India to get the Henry Viscardi Achievement Award. And she also runs an organization called Cross the Hurdles. Okay, so just a quick reminder to people that the information here is not to be taken as a medical consultation. So for specific medical issues, please do discuss with your doctor. This session is being recorded. If you're logged into Zoom, you can post your questions on the Q&A. And if you're on Facebook, you can post them on the live feed and we will answer them. As always, you can follow us on our website, our Facebook, Twitter. Um, all of these webinars we do get recorded and put up on YouTube as well. And you can write into us at editor@patientsengage.com if you have any, any experience to share. Just a reminder, later in the month, we will be doing a session on prostate cancer. And as I said, join the Facebook group Cancer Power Circle if you're a cancer patient, a survivor, or a caregiver. So let's quickly get going. Um, yeah, I think there's somebody's got an echo coming a little bit. I don't know why, but I think there is. Anyway, let's get started. Dr. Gorvi, if you can talk to us about the common cancers in India first, which are the top few cancers in India?
At the outset, let me thank you, Aparna, for the kind introduction and Dr. Sheetal for coordinating this session all the way. So, coming to the common cancers in India, they are mainly tobacco related. And if you look at the common cancers among men in India, it's lip and oral cavity cancers. followed by the lung cancer, and then it's the stomach, colorectum, and the esophagus. When we look at women in India, in fact, if you look globally also in each and nearly every country in this world, breast cancer is the most common cancer. And the same story goes for India. The second most common cancer in India among women is the uterine cervix cancer, that is cancer of the mouth of the uterus. And then that is followed by ovary, lip oral cavity is again the fourth most common cancer among even among women in India. And then comes the colorectum.
Okay, thanks. Yes, and I forgot to introduce Sheetal and I are the moderators for this session. So thank you, Dr. Gorvi, for reminding. So I think there are statements often made, right? Smoking causes cancer or obesity causes cancer. And sometimes something is called a risk factor and sometimes something is called a cause. Can you explain the difference between a risk factor and causative factor?
So it's very important to understand the difference between a cause and a risk factor. Because if you prevent a cause, if you stop a cause, the disease will not happen. For example, if there is no poliovirus infection, you don't get poliomyelitis. But in case of cancer, there are only few cancers where we are actually able to identify the causative factor. For example, for in case of uterine cervix cancer, we now know that only if a woman gets infected with high risk HPV, with high risk human papilloma virus, and if this infection remains persistent, only then the women would go ahead and develop a cervical cancer. So that's a cause, that's a causative factor. Whereas risk factors, for example, in breast, we really don't know. I mean, globally, it is the most common cancer. So people are spending millions of dollars to identify what is the cause of breast cancer. Everyone is doing that. But then, till date, we have not been able to identify the exact cause. But we know several risk factors. For example, a woman who starts menstruating early men are not breastfeeding, late menopause, being obese, having alcohol, having a strong family history. So these are all risk factors. The women may or may not have a combination of this risk factors, and she may still develop a breast cancer. But her chances of getting the breast cancer would increase if she has this particular risk factor. So there is a difference, there is a definite difference between a causative factor and a risk factor.
Okay, thank you. And also therefore, can cancer be prevented or can you only reduce the risk of cancer?
Cancer can be prevented to a very large extent. In fact, according to WHO, one third of the cancers are preventable, and more one third are actually can be prevented. That is secondary prevention. That is, it can be detected early, and we can diagnose a pre-cancer and prevent a cancer from occurring. So, to a large extent, cancers are preventable. For example, tobacco, we know it is responsible or it is linked to at least 60% of cancers. So, it's a simple way to stop tobacco. Similarly, there are several, as you gave example of obesity, alcohol. So, there are several factors which we can actually prevent this. It's simple to prevent, and then you can prevent the cancers.
And you mentioned pre-cancer. Can you explain that? Is that valid in all kinds of cancers or it's only in a few?
Pre-cancers, we have still not been able to identify in all cancers. But fortunately for us, like for example, oral cancer, which is the most common cancer for us, we know we have been able to identify the pre-cancerous stages. In fact, the precancerous, very early precancerous stages like the leukoplakia, the white patch in the mouth, it's still not a cancer. The erythroplakia, the red patches in the mouth, the submucous fibrosis. So we have identified several precancerous stages. And at that stage, if a person actually quits tobacco, he can still reverse back to normal. So from a precancerous stage, a patient can reverse back to normal. Whereas once the cancer develops, he has to undergo all the treatment and the chances of reversal are not there. The second most common cancer among women, the uterine cervix cancer,
Mm,
we have been able to identify the entire natural history of this disease. That is, from the time a woman develops an HPV infection till the time that she actually develops a cervical cancer, it's a period of 10 to 15 years, a long period in our hand.
mm,
It progresses from early precancer to a later precancer. And if the woman comes for regular checkup to us, we can diagnose that precancer, treat her completely on an OPD based treatment, and she is normal then with regular follow-ups. So pre-cancer gives us a large amount of time in our hand to reverse it completely, whereas once a cancer develops, it is an irreversible process.
right, right. Thank you. And I think you alluded to a few, but can you again kind of talk about the role of lifestyle changes in cancer prevention? What are the key lifestyle changes that are recommended?
Globally now, when we talk about prevention of cancers, we just don't talk about cancer prevention. In fact, we have clubbed this into non-communicable diseases and
Right.
cancer prevention, because the risk factors for non-communicable diseases like heart disease, diabetes, and cancers, they are similar, they are same, and chronic respiratory disease, they are same.
Mm,
Four major modifiable risk factors, that is tobacco consumption in any form, whether it is smoking tobacco or smokeless tobacco, whatever form of or applied forms of tobacco, and in whichever form that you consume, it has to be totally stopped.
right.
Alcohol, there is nothing like moderate consumption or something, it has to be totally stopped, alcohol consumption. Obesity and overweight, we need to work on it, though it's a huge problem in the Western world, but we are soon moving towards that trend. So obesity and overweight are linked to several cancers in the body. Unhealthy diet, consuming, we need to consume more of fibers and vegetables and less of fats in the diet, and this is something that a dietary modification, though all this sounds simple, they are actually little we have to work on it to make this lifestyle changes. And
Right.
then physical inactivity, we need to remain physically active, and especially in this COVID times, I think everyone has realized that how inactive we all are. So physical inactivity is linked to several cancers, and all this. And again, though in India we don't talk so much about exposure to sunlight and UV radiation, it is a huge problem in certain countries like Australia and others. Uh, and in India, though the awareness is less, but then we are not completely protected. And using sunscreens to protect us when we are exposed to sun, it's very important and useful.
Right. Right. Thank you. Um, Abha, you were just to remind you, you're on mute. But are persons with disabilities at a greater risk of cancer compared to the normal population, or at the same risk, or what's the analysis on that?
Thank you, Aparna. Yeah, like Gauravi, sorry, like as Dr. Gauravi has said, like obesity.
Mm,
Obesity is one of the risk factors, overweight, obesity. And according to American Medical Journal, persons with disabilities are 53% more obese than non-disabled people.
right.
So that puts them at a higher risk. And women with disabilities, like if I talk about myself, women with disabilities are again at a higher risk for breast cancer.
Mm,
uh, in certain kind of disabilities, hormonal treatment is given, like in multiple sclerosis.
mm,
So breast cancer there becomes like it is a greater risk for them. More exposure to x-rays, more exposure to x-rays for treatment and all. So
mm,
all this puts women with disabilities at higher risk. And the people who are intellectually disabled, or the people who have learning disabilities, their symptoms are reported often very late.
Mm.
So it puts them at a greater risk because diagnosis is not done in time. Then whenever diagnosis is done, it is too late to
Right.
get it treated. So all these factors put them at a higher risk of getting cancer, and mortality rate is higher for them.
Mm.
And like paralysis, it completely disrupts our digestive system,
Mm.
digestive tract. So there is a greater risk for developing cancers of digestive tract, like uh, and the problems of kidney, colon, everything can be disrupted because of paralysis. Constipation is mainly like a routine for those with spinal cord injury. So all this gives them like at a greater risk. They are always at a greater risk.
Okay. You mentioned things like X-rays. Just wanting to clarify with you, Dr. Gorby, what is the you know, what is the risk associated with things like X-rays?
Exposure to radiation, repeated exposure, it's not a one-time exposure, but repeated exposure to radiation is itself a risk factor for cancer. And
Mm.
it may be medical exposure to radiation or occupational exposure to radiation. So in
Right.
case of disability, I understand it's mainly the medical exposure to
Correct.
X-rays, radiation, and that itself is a risk factor for many cancers.
Okay. Um, so, what is the let's look at how we can apart from making lifestyle changes, how, because you said secondary prevention is linked to early detection. So what are the best modes of early detection, and what is the role that uh, for instance screening plays in it?
Screening has a very big role to play. Fortunately for India, the three most common cancers are also the ones that can be detected early. For
Mm.
example, for oral cavity cancer, which is again, I mean, India has the highest number of oral cavity cancers than seen anywhere in the world. And
Right.
only one country, India, it contributes to more than one fourth of the global oral cavity cancer cases. So it's such a big problem for us. And simple preventive screening methods, like, I mean, this can be carried out. You don't need privacy for oral cavity cancer screening, and this can be carried out in any small place wherein you can get a good torchlight. As simple as that. Good
Right.
illumination is what is required. And for a campsite, we use simple candy sticks. Simple candy sticks and good illumination, oral visual inspection, and this has been scientifically proved. In
Mm.
fact, the only scientific evidence with the help of what we define as large randomized controlled trial that comes from India itself. There is only one such trial which has shown to the world that this simple inspection can reduce mortality due to oral cavity cancers amongst the high risk individuals, that is people who are using tobacco and or alcohol. Because people who are using both tobacco and alcohol, the risk is synergistic, it increases several fold. Then, when you come to breast cancer screening, uh, in fact, we would do a mammogram only for women who are above 50 or who is below 50 but symptomatic and we are suspecting a cancer. Otherwise, simple clinical breast examination, that is, examination of breast that is conducted by a trained healthcare personnel. So,
Mm.
trained healthcare personnel can be a trained primary health worker, it may be a trained nurse or a trained doctor who is thoroughly trained in examining a breast. So, a clinical breast examination can can diagnose breast cancers at a very early stage, and our own research has shown that. I mean, this is the only research done globally till now on clinical breast examination from Tata Memorial Hospital, and it shows to the world that clinical breast examination does reduce mortality from breast cancer in women who are above 50 years. So, and for cervical cancer screening, we have our own research that is published shows that application of dilute acetic acid, which is also known as vinegar, which we normally use for our cooking. I mean, it hardly costs anything. Few paise, I would say, for a examination, and that can reduce mortality due to cervical cancer. So, what we are looking in our hospital is not the very high-end screening methods that will not have a population-based application. We are looking at simple, low cost, but effective. That
Right.
effective word is very important. Effective methods of screening that would help control the cancer in our situations.
Right. Okay. Um, and the other 2 or 3 cancers which we see as common, what are the signs that people should watch out for because of the lack of screening guidelines? So things like lung cancer, prostate cancer, and colorectal cancer.
In lung cancer, a patient, it's again, you would get a history of smoking in many of the patients, and that's linked, or there may be an occupational exposure to occupational carcinogens, arsenic, asbestos, and others, and you will get a clear history. So, history taking is very important. And normally, people present with chronic cough, a cough, hemoptysis, a cough with blood expectoration, loss of weight, or breathlessness. But normally, by the time a lung cancer is diagnosed, it's quite in a late stage. So we are not doing routine screening for lung cancer. It's amongst the symptomatic, and initially people were looking at X-ray tests to be done annually amongst the chronic smokers, but that has not been shown to be an effective method. Low test is shown to be effective in diagnosing lung cancers early. But again, the diagnostic modality after a person is screened positive are not so easy in case of lung cancer. Coming to colorectal cancer, the patients usually present with a lot of bowel disturbances, and there may be blood in the stools or black colored stools that the patient may complain of, and the patient may have GI disturbances, bloating, or thin stools that are passed. So these are the usual symptoms of colorectal cancer.
Right.
And in case of prostate cancer, the patient typically complains, it's a higher age patients, and they complain of not being able to pass the urine completely, or there's a straining while passing the urine and while stopping, incomplete urination, or they have to get up many times in the night to pass urine, or there's blood in the urine. So all these are complaints of patients with prostate cancer.
Okay. Thank you, doctor. Sheetal, you can jump in if you have any
Yeah,
questions.
I just had a question. Dr. Gauravi, how often should cancer screening take place?
That's a very nice question, Dr. Sheetal. According to our national guidelines, when operational guidelines that have been released for our country, currently it is advocated at 5-year interval. I mean, we are still, health is a state subject in India, so different states are at different stages of implementation. Some have started few years back, some are just into the rolling phase. But according to the scientific evidence, clinical breast examination has to be done every 2 yearly if it has to reduce mortality from breast cancer. Because why are we doing screening? It is not just to detect a cancer early, it has to finally lead to reduction in mortality. That's our aim. When you're looking at cervical cancer screening and we are looking at VIA or visual inspection after application of acetic acid, dilute acetic acid, again, it's a 2 yearly screening. So that's what we are looking at. And in case of oral cavity screening, it can be a yearly screening that we are looking at. But because all these programs are combined together and currently we are still in the implementation phase, so according to the operational guidelines, the screening is advocated at least once in 5 years.
And for cervical screening, is Pap smear still done, or has HPV DNA test taken over as the standard now?
I think any of these modalities that you use, cytology, we cannot say that cytology is bad or something. I mean, we have seen the Western countries reducing mortality due to cervical cancer over the last 7 decades working with cytology. We don't talk much of cytology because in Indian situation, when you go for population-based implementation, you can imagine that having a pathologist in every district of our country, we don't have, right? And having one pathologist at a village level or even a cytologist at a village level, that's something that's not really feasible. So that is the reason implementation of pap smear based screening at the community level is not feasible. There are two aspects when we talk about population based screening and when we are talking about individual patient coming to my screening clinic. If a patient is coming to a screening clinic, I will offer cytology. I will offer HPV DNA. HPV DNA is a very good sensitivity and specificity. In fact, it's a very objective test. So I will offer whatever the patient would choose. HPV DNA test. If you do an HPV DNA, you are assured that you don't need to call the patient for the next 5 years if the patient is negative, because it has a very good negative predictive value. So as far as individual screening goes, we can offer them a battery of investigations, whatever, if in the city, in the rural area, whatever is available. And again, VI remains. So HPV DNA, cytology, VI, whatever is available, the patient should go for it. The idea is patient should go for screening. That's more important than which screening test.
Just to clarify, VI is visual inspection. So for our audience. So what is the role of HPV vaccine? Is that, is that now the standard in terms of advice at a population level or not yet at a population level? I know in a lot of Western countries, it's pretty much the standard, but what is the status in India?
So HPV vaccine is again a preventive vaccine for cancer, and it not only prevents. We are looking at it at preventing not only cervical cancer but cancers of the vagina, vulva, anus. So mainly the anogenital region. Even for males, it is useful. We need to understand here that this vaccine is quite a new entry vaccine. That is, it was introduced in 2006. It's introduced in 2006 and 2020, so it's just a 14 years old vaccine. We are very sure that all the studies have shown that the vaccine is extremely safe. It produces very good level of antibodies. It has a good immunogenicity, and it also prevents cervical pre-cancers. Yeah, but the people who are vaccinated, it's for girls. It's for girls before initiation of sexual activity. Once the sexual activity is initiated, it doesn't protect, okay, because it's not a therapeutic vaccine, it's a preventive vaccine. So these girls who are vaccinated at 10 years, 15 years, they still have to reach the age of 50 years, 60 years for us to actually know whether this vaccine prevents cervical cancer or not. Currently, the evidence goes in favor because it's a safe vaccine. It gives good level of antibodies. We have seen that it prevents cervical pre-cancers, and only a cervical pre-cancer progresses to cervical cancer. But whether it 100% protects against cervical cancer, only time will tell us. And again, the vaccine that we have, it currently it protects against 70% of cervical cancers. In India, we still have not introduced it at a population level have not incorporated it in the national immunization program, though some states have taken it up on a pilot basis. But globally, majority countries, nearly 60%, I would say, have incorporated HPV vaccine in their national immunization program for girls. And some of the countries have also incorporated it for boys.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so my next question was, I have a boy. Should I be giving him the HPV?
So currently it is not ethical, not licensed for use for boys in India. So you cannot.
Okay. Oh, okay. All right.
And is it? Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, Sheetal.
No, my question was to Abha. If you know, HPV is something that your doctor would recommend to you, whether
Never.
you're gynae or you're
I
a
mean,
general
she's now
physician.
above the age, but
Not
Yeah,
to you.
though
Yeah,
I
yeah,
am
yeah.
above the
to
To the
age,
disability community, I'm saying.
yeah, I'm very sorry to say, and it is very unfortunate that women and girls with disabilities are assumed to be sexually inactive. वो कभी सेक्सुअली एक्टिव होंगी ही नहीं, उनकी शादी होगी ही नहीं, तो उनको एचपीवी देने का कोई फायदा नहीं है. And the same applies with cervical screening, means they are assumed to be sexually inactive or non-sexual beings.
Mm.
So I think they are the most neglected tribe in
Right.
even in disability community.
I know Dr. Gauravi definitely wants to respond to that.
Yes, basically, I just wanted to add here that the HPV screening that Dr. Sheetal mentioned, HPV screening, now we also have a technique of self-collection of HPV, wherein the women can collect her own sample and give it for investigation to the laboratory. I think that is something that will work for the disability community, because then you don't have to get on a screening table, examination table, and that can be done. Again, mammography, I understand I mean, it's not very commonly done, and there are no provisions made for a mammography to be done for a disability person. But clinical breast examination is something that can be done by a trained personnel, and teaching of breast self-examination to increase their awareness of their own breast health. That is something that is feasible.
Yeah, so that was my next question to Abha, was what are the challenges faced by both men and women with disabilities in terms of access to screening?
Yeah, there are many. There are many because the existence of services does not, they do not guarantee their usability.
Mm.
Though we have services, we have many services, we have many options, but people with disabilities are not able to use them because of the many factors, many challenges, barriers. The most challenge being poverty.
Mm.
Means it is the treatment, the screenings, and it is too expensive for them to bear. There is absence of medical insurance for the disability community in our country. Very unfortunate. And how do we reach a center, a healthcare center?
Mm.
Absence of accessible transportation and convenient transportation. Then infrastructure issues in the healthcare center,
Mm.
inaccessible medical equipments. These are
May-
all the
Can
barriers
you
that.
elaborate a bit on the inaccessible medical equipment so that,
Yeah, again, the same, like I have mentioned earlier, like the inaccessible mammogram machine, even the examination tables, they are inaccessible. We have to be carried, and we have to be like, we need help. And so many times we really have to compromise with our dignity,
Mm.
because they always हमें उठाकर बिठाया जाता है, and the staff that assists, that comes to help us, they are not well trained in handling certain disabilities like spasticity. Cerebral palsy में spasticity होती है, so a person would have spasm or the tremors in their body. तो उनको कैसे help करोगे? The medical staff, the assistants, they are not well trained in that. There is lack of sign language interpreters. जो deaf community है, वो कैसे अपनी बात कैसे communicate करेंगे, आपसे अपनी issues कैसे बताएंगे? So all this presence of inaccessible infrastructure, the infrastructure is completely inaccessible.
Right.
How do we move on in wheelchairs in a medical room? It is too small. So इस तरह के जो hurdles हैं, जो obstacles हैं, वो major most barrier होते हैं हमारी screening के लिए. Again, the vaccination and the national immunization program, if there is any for cancer prevention, we are never included in it. हमें awareness ही नहीं होती है उसकी. especially semi-urban and rural areas में people don't know. And it
Right.
is assumed कि अरे इसको तो ये issue हो गया है, अब इसको cancer थोड़ी होगा. इस तरह से भी, है ना? इस तरह के बहुत issues होते हैं. We are discriminated even in our families. तो health जो और nutrition है, educate जो health behavior होना चाहिए, proper health behavior होना चाहिए, वो नहीं होता काफी घरों में. So
Right.
वो सब हमारा obstacle बन जाते हैं.
Right, right. And I think you talked of the sign language. I know that during COVID times, for instance, that has become an even bigger issue with
Right.
masks. So जो lip read करते हैं, they can't even do lip
Mhm.
reading anymore. And
Yeah, we can have the accessible mask where there is like a window here and transparent part is there, and we can use those masks. But वही है, सोच की बात होती है.
Right. But so far, I think those transparent masks are not as, and they're not ready
Not
for
yet,
doctors
right.
to be using it, right?
Right,
So
right.
medical staff. But yeah, I know soch ki baat bhi hoti hai because somebody should be designing these. Correct. Thank you.
People designed to show it for their lipsticks, but they don't need their own.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Dr. Gorvi, during COVID times, people have been very scared to go for their annual screenings, etc. So, what is your advice at the moment to those people? Yeah.
I'll come to your question. I just wanted to add a little bit to the last question, wherein
Sure.
I completely agree with Abha, whatever she said. Just a ray of hope that we are actually doing research to see if visually impaired girls can be trained to do medical tactile examination of the breast. And they have been, whatever we saw, and they've been really good because their hands are more sensitive than anyone. And we are trying to go in for a very large trial with the medical tactile examiners to see if they can diagnose breast cancers. Doing a clinical breast examination, they of course use special techniques like placing some strips on the breast and take a little longer. But then there are other positive factors that the woman is assured there is complete privacy, and she knows we explain the women that their hands are really more sensitive than ours. Right? So that was one small thing I wanted to add.
That's a great news.
Yeah.
Yeah, coming to your question, Aparna, yes, people, especially in March, April, were really scared to come out for a preventive checkup, right? But slowly we are picking up, and with adequate precautions being taken at the hospital, the chances of acquiring an infection at the hospital are really minimal. You will not see anyone without an N95 in the hospital. Double mask, in fact, that we use, and the kind of precautions that we are taking in terms of sterilization of equipment, the social distancing, and everything. So I think people are coming out of the fear, and they have now started to come for preventive checkups. Initial 3-4 months were really difficult, unless required, unless symptomatic, people would not go out. But I guess within a few months, we are overcoming the fear of COVID and focusing on diseases that can be preventable, and approaching a healthcare facility is now, people are open to that idea.
Okay, thank you. Sheetal, you're on mute.
So a lot of hospitals, Dr. Gauravi, provide these screening packages, right? So would you recommend taking up these packages every, be it 2 years or 5 years? And my follow-up question to that is there such a thing as too much screening?
Yeah, so it depends from place to place, and And some people may do mammography for 30 years old lady, so without any family history or any high risk factors, and that would be called as overscreening and actually more harmful than doing any good. So if we follow the guidelines, and whichever hospital, of course, in private hospital, the charges would be more. In government setup, it's more about promoting and people to take up screening. So the charges are minuscule. In fact, the government bears the charges, most of the charges cost that is involved in screening. So, not that all private hospitals would do a mammogram for a younger lady or do unnecessary screening or something like that. So, the guidelines are followed, uh, I mean, private hospitals have a big role to play because only the government hospitals may not suffice at all. So, private hospitals with proper screening guidelines that are followed, uh, starting screening at the age of 30 and then taking regular screenings according to the guidelines would be they have a big role to play, I would say.
Right. And about, I know you said that most of the time persons with disabilities are not covered, but have you come across any packages or anything,
No,
or any government schemes that cover any, uh,
no,
screenings?
no, unfortunately not.
Okay. So you're part of the generic or you're excluded? I mean, it's a
Part
self-pay
of,
model.
we are the part of the generic, means we would be like offered all the tests, all that we can be offered, which are done for the non-disabled people, but nothing special, nothing like no special accommodation, no special
Hmm.
modifications in that,
Right,
neither
right,
subsidized monthly.
right, right. Um, Dr. Gorvi, we've got a question on hereditary cancers. So, what can be done about can while there are lifestyle changes to be done to try and reduce, what can be done about hereditary cancers? Can anything be done about hereditary cancers?
So we need to understand that all cancers are not hereditary. There are a few cancers which are linked to genetic history.
Mm,
Again, if I give you an example that the breast cancer may be hereditary, but we need to look at many factors to decide whether it's an hereditary cancer or not. For
mm,
example, for any hereditary cancers, how many relatives on the same side of the family actually have suffered from the same cancer or a related cancer? Whether there is a rare cancer occurring in the family,
mm,
and or whether one of the individuals has suffered from two or more cancers, a single individual suffering from two or more cancers, and what was the age at which the person was diagnosed with cancer. So depending on the cancer, if it was diagnosed at a younger age than the average age at diagnosis, then it may be classified as a hereditary cancer. Now, a battery of investigations and genetic tests may be offered to an individual, but whether it would be really necessary and whether it would change the course of treatment, that needs to be recognized. Telling anyone that you have a 45% chance that you may develop this cancer. Now that has no meaning for the individual. It may have a statistical value, but then if the individual suffers from that cancer, it's 100% for that individual.
correct.
Yeah, and if he doesn't suffer, I mean, it's a 0% for him. So, getting a genetic test done, and then we have to explain the pros and cons. If we are looking at genetic testing, then it has to be with proper genetic counseling. It has to be done in a proper genetic counseling clinic with a pre-test counseling and a post-test counseling.
Mm,
And the individual's total permission should be there, understanding the risk of lot of anxiety and false security or false fear that may be arose in the individual, whereas that individual may never ever get that cancer. So depending on the which kind of cancer in the family, all this risk and benefits have to be weighed. And then, yeah, of course, there are some chemo prevention and surgical prevention methods that may be offered, but starting the screening early, if it's linked to a hereditary cancer is very important, and working on the risk factors becomes very important in case of hereditary cancer. Yeah.
Right, right. Okay. And then there are also these newer methods of screening that have emerged, like, for an example, thermal screening. Let's start with thermal screening. What is the effectiveness of it? Are these now, kind of standard, acceptable screening methods, or they are still in very early stages of uh, design and development?
For each cancer, there are a number of screening methods that are available. Uh, when we take it in a clinical setting and at a population-based screening is when we have a level 1 evidence that this is an effective method. That is the time we take it. So, for example, what you're talking about, thermography or thermal scanning, which has been used for breast cancer screening, there are even other methods available like EIS and other things. But then the research has been done at a very small level with few cross-sectional studies and few case control studies. A big randomized control trial showing efficacy that it does at least downstage the cancer or it does prevent or reduce mortality due to breast cancer has not taken place. So these are very small initial trials that have happened. Not a single large randomized control trial has taken place. No country has included this in the national immunization program. They have not been included in any population-based screening, and hence they're more of research purpose than I would say for clinical use.
Right, right. And the other thing we keep hearing about these days is liquid biopsies.
Yeah, so liquid biopsy, one advantage is that you take a sample of blood, or saliva or urine, and you look at the particles of DNA, and then look at the rest. But then these are all for future research. They are not currently for the screening, population-based screening purposes.
Right, right. Okay.
So there is no screening for blood cancers, is there?
No, there is no screening for
Any
blood
of the
cancers. No.
So one question we've got, there is this, this kind of information that goes around, right? That when somebody's got cancer, they should stop eating sugar, or if they stop sugar, then they won't get cancers. What is the relationship between sugar consumption and cancer?
Actually, there is no relation between sugar consumption and cancer. Uh, if there is an insulin resistance, then the insulin like growth factor, they increase in the body. And if that is so, then if there is a cancer, then the growth of cancer can occur at a very faster speed. So it is not linked in any way to development of a cancer. But if there is an insulin resistance, then the growth of cancer can occur at a larger speed.
So does that mean that somebody who has diabetes and if they get cancer, their cancer is likely to be a rapidly growing cancer?
No, if the sugar is well controlled and even if the person, it doesn't mean so.
Okay. And we talked a bit about tobacco, but does it relate to all forms of tobacco? Because in India, we have not just smoking, we have smokeless tobacco. And now there is not so much, not officially, but there is a growth of vaping as well. So.
All forms of tobacco are linked to cancer, and there is absolutely no safe limit of tobacco that, if someone is consuming just one gutka packet or someone is smoking just one cigarette, can you say that that person will not get a cancer? Because this is commonly when the patients come to us, they would say, cigarette leta ho din mein. So, so that is how the people react. But all forms of tobacco are harmful. it depends on what form of tobacco that you are using and which form of cancer you will get. That is little bit related. For example, people who are using the smokeless forms or chewing forms of tobacco or application forms of tobacco. For example, in Maharashtra, women would apply masheri or burnt tobacco all over for hours together to their teeth. And all this is linked to oral cavity cancers. People who smoke, for example, cigarette smokers, they are more likely to get lung cancers. And so the form of tobacco and hookah bars. In fact, a few years back, we could see hookah parlors all over the place. Nowadays, again, they become less, and we could see youngsters spending hours together at the hookah parlors. Though they advertised it as non-tobacco, but it actually contains tobacco, which is very addictive, and that's the reason these youngsters used to be there for hours together, sharing the same hookah. So all this is related to cancer. And then the form in which you consume even the smoking tobacco is very useful to understand which type of cancer a person develops. For example, a person who is smoking bidis, which is very common in rural India, all over India, in the rural places, he would take small puffs, but very frequent puffs, because if he holds the bidi in the hand, it goes off. So the smoke keeps rotating in the oral cavity. So he's more likely to get oral or upper throat cancers. Whereas a person who is smoking cigarette, he inhales, he takes very deep puffs, maybe taking infrequent puffs because he holds the cigarette in his hand. And he is more likely to get a lung cancer. So the type of tobacco that you use, it relates with the kind of cancer that one gets.
Right. And typically, I know lung cancer is associated with smoking, but can you also get lung cancer even as a non-smoker?
Yes, you can get the lung cancer even as a non-smoker, and occupational exposures to several chemicals. Every occupation is linked to hazard. There is no occupation which is not linked to hazard. If being a health professional is, or anything for that matter, every occupation has a hazard. That doesn't mean that we don't work, but then if proper precautions are taken at the workplace, both by the individual employee and as a protective mechanism at the workplace, wherein all the standards are followed so as to reduce the exposure. If both these parts are taken well care of, that suppose in an industry, a person is given N95 mask or a proper mask and proper uniforms, and if they are not using those protective gears, then again the industry is not to be blamed. But of course, strict implementation is necessary. So occupational exposures are linked to many lung cancers, and again, uh, in the rural areas, we are looking at also the household burning of wood for cooking. That also may be linked to cancers, and we are still investigating on those particular aspects. So there could be lung cancers even amongst the non-smokers.
Right. Two more questions. One is with somebody who's talking about pollution. What is the evidence linking pollution to cancer? And also, because you talked of diet, processed foods.
Yeah, so of course, pollution is linked, but I would say more of passive smoking. We talk about smokers, we forget the passive smokers. And individual smoking nowadays, people are not smoking at the workplaces, but otherwise, till recently, when smoking was not really banned at the workplaces, the colleagues who have spent years together in the same cabin, and you can imagine the exposure to passive smoking. Again, in the household, the spouse, the kids who are exposed to the tobacco smoke, and even as the children grow up, there are several other problems that they get, including chronic respiratory diseases, asthma, slow growth, and learning problems that may happen for the people, the children, because of the passive exposure to smoke. Air pollution, yes, it is one of the risk factors for lung cancer.
Okay. And processed foods?
Yes. So, as it goes with any non-communicable diseases, the healthy diet would be containing lot of vegetables, fibers, and fruits in the diet, and less of processed meat and less of oily and fatty food.
Okay, thank you. I guess it's a comment. If screening is being recommended and someone is getting it done without a symptom or hereditary issues, can we call that over screening? But then on the other hand, being careful is important too. So how do we balance that?
In fact, screening, the definition of screening is when you don't have any signs of or symptoms. So
Mm,
screening has to be done when you don't have any signs of or symptoms. And I think that is the basic reason why Aparna is holding this session. Because once you have symptoms, you are anyway going to approach a healthcare facility. And that's not screening, that's a diagnostic investigation or diagnostic confirmation. So
right,
we want people to come when they absolutely don't have any symptoms. So that's screening, that's not over screening.
right. Thank you. Abha, every cancer awareness month or cancer month or breast cancer month, prostate cancer month, etc., there are various messages that come out. Do you think they need to be modified to include persons with disability, or is it a given that whatever is out there, in any case is for everyone?
Definitely, the campaigns, the awareness campaigns, they have to include us, and in accessible format means the format which a person with, because disability is one size cannot fit all.
Mm,
We have different kinds of disabilities, and the needs are different. So every campaign should be in accessible format, whether posters are there or whatever, the radio cap, the TV caps in TV, we can have closed captioning, and different formats can be there, electronic media, anything. The awareness campaigns, they have to be like accessible. UNCRPD, United Nations Convention for Right of Persons with Disabilities, Article 25 clearly states that persons with disabilities, they have the right to best kind of medical services and without any discrimination. So
correct.
if the awareness campaigns, they are not in accessible formats, or if they exclude us, then there would be a kind of
Mm,
discrimination done. So the campaigns have to be relevant, flexible, and accessible for us.
thank you. Thank you. I think, Sheetal, you have any more questions?
My only question is, Dr. Gauravi, do you have any advice for persons with disability regarding cancer screening and prevention?
I don't have much experience in this field, but we have done awareness programs for visually impaired individuals and for hearing impaired individuals. And we had to modify the awareness sessions totally because so as to meet the needs. And it was more in the form of games and getting their confidence, initially establishing rapport, and then it cannot be in the form of lectures or something like that. And a lot of things, as you rightly said, we assume that they will not be consuming tobacco. Why would they? But
Mhm.
then when you speak, we understand they know exactly how to ask for that particular brand of tobacco. Also, they get it and they know it. And we really, I mean, it's unfortunate that not a lot of work is being done in this field. But I agree with you; it needs a lot of attention.
And one question from me to Dr. Gauravi. Can ultrasounds like substitute mammograms?
Uh, Not really,
Okay.
because ultrasounds are good for younger women.
Okay.
A mammography may not pick up a cancer in younger women because in younger age, the breast and tissue density is more
Okay.
because of the circulating estrogen. And then breast tumor may be missed by a mammography. Sonographies are very good in picking up benign lesions in the breast. If there's a cyst, it's a good
Okay.
modality to pick up. But there are people who do good sonographies and pick up breast cancers. Again, sonography has not been used on a population level for screening of breast cancers, though in the individual screening level, people are using it, and there have been research trials also on handheld sonography machines for screening at the population level for breast cancers, but it's still not actually implemented in any country as a form of national screening.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I just want to add to that because I think because it's so recent, in the last month, the 2-3 webinars we did on breast cancer, we had, I think, a few panelists who talked about their sonography picking up something, but then the gynae told them that it was benign or fibroid, and later on it was diagnosed as later stage breast cancer. So I don't know if it's a matter of skill of the healthcare professional to be able to ascertain as well. I don't know.
So if there is a suspicion of a malignancy on a sonography, it's better that we go in for a mammography to confirm it. And then, of course, the ultimate confirmatory method is a biopsy. It's a biopsy and histopathological diagnosis only, which can actually tell you whether it's a benign or a malignant lesion.
Right. Okay. Let me just do a quick check if there's any other open questions. But otherwise, I don't think there are. Any closing comments, Abha? Actually, I have to ask you, Abha, because again, there's somebody who's asked, can I say differently abled instead of disabled? So I want you to explain that.
No, we all are differently abled. You are also differently abled. So we are, every human on this earth is differently abled. So we take it as a derogatory thing if we are like labeled or put in boxes. We are persons with disabilities. We are persons first. So different abilities everybody has.
Thank you. Thank you, Abha. I just wanted to, we try and keep educating people, but this keeps coming up. So thought I would ask you. But anyway, any closing comments, Abha?
Include us. Just a very small message, include us in healthcare. Our lives are also precious.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Gauravi, any final messages?
I think we focus a lot on cancers which are very rare and which we still don't know how to prevent it or detect it early. So let our focus be on common cancers that can be prevented with simple lifestyle modifications, and the cancers which can be detected early by screening. So my appeal to everyone, especially to all women above 30 years, go for regular screening. For all men, go for screening, and also simple lifestyle changes which we all should work on. No one can get it done from us other than ourselves. Stop consuming tobacco in any form, stop alcohol consumption, modify your diet to a healthy diet, take vaccines, hepatitis B vaccines, simple to prevent hepatocellular carcinoma. Look at other vaccines, cancer preventable vaccines. We have to work on obesity and overweight and be physically active. Avoid exposure to UV radiation, and if necessary, use protectives. So with this, thank you, Aparna, for the opportunity.
No problem. Thank you, Dr. Gauravi. Thank you, Abha. I think we've covered a lot of ground today in 1 hour. So I think it's a very useful session for a lot of our viewers. And thank you to all our viewers who are watching and who send in their questions. So thanks so much. I'll stop the live screen. Sheetal, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gauravi, so much. Thank you, Abha.
Okay, thank you. My pleasure.
That was a very informative session.